This is Tony Blair. It's 1971. He's 18 and doesn't have a political thought in his head, but he does have one overriding ambition: to become a rock star.
If you'd said to me when I was 17 that your pal Tony's going to be Prime Minister one day, I would have laughed so hard. And so would he, you know. It would just have been absurd.
We used to know him, and that's not the way I thought of him at all. He couldn't run a gig, let alone the country. You know, I mean, it really is incredible.
It's almost mind-boggling. There was nothing in his head. It was just, I want to be a rock star, please.
And over the next year, the young Tony Blair will try desperately hard to follow his rock dream. This is the true story of that year, told by his friends and those who knew him well. This is Fettes, one of Britain's most exclusive public schools. It's a strict, highly academic institution with a strong rugby tradition, and for the 5 years up to 1971, one of the 450 boy boarders is none other than Anthony Charles Linton Blair.
Well, Blair, as of course we knew him, was definitely at the cool end of the market, definitely. Probably the coolest guy in the school. If you look at photographs from the time, he looked like the epitome of drugs, sex, rock and roll, and therefore worried the shit out of anyone in authority.
Fettes was obsessed with rules. There were rules for everything. You weren't allowed to talk to somebody in the year above you with your hands in your pockets. You weren't allowed to talk to a master with, you had to have your jacket button put together. And Tony was one of the people that would push these rules. In fact, I don't even think he recognized them by the time he was in his final year.
And here is Tony Blair in his final year, sneaking back into school early one morning after a long night at an Elton John concert.
There was an incident which allegedly was a sort of ladder down the dormitory window and out to the town. But he was elusive in many ways, even then. And he became, I think, a sort of slightly aged, artful dodger, getting through, getting by, getting out of pretty well all situations. So the current thought of Teflon Tony was definitely well in evidence as a schoolboy.
He was quite a rebel in some respects. Cool was the word that I suspect he would like to hear being applied to him to other people at that time, and so therefore he walked the walk of somebody who was cool at that time, which meant that the clothes were never quite worn correctly. The hair was never quite as short as it should have been.
At Fettes, hair was rigorously cropped on a regular basis. You weren't allowed to have it over your ears or touching your collar. And of course, boys found their way around this particular custom. Tony's way was to use butter or margarine, whatever we had in our kitchen at the time, and he would lather his hair down and he'd get away with it.
But even with a fridge full of butter, the young Teflon Tony couldn't get away with everything, all of the time.
Caning still existed in the school, but only for pretty serious offences, and usually only with the younger pupils. But Tony Blair must have pushed the limits fairly hard, because I know that he was caned in his last year, which was very unusual.
I think he was persistent breaking of school rules. It was kind of 5 yellow cards. And it did strike us all as being pretty bad, even for those days.
He was very nearly expelled. I don't know what for. I think probably just pushing people so far and taking so many small liberties that people got very fed up with him.
Thank you. Sir?
And he was not made a prefect, principally because the housemaster felt that Tony Blair's leadership was liable to take people in the wrong direction.
But the future PM is developing the people skills that will allow him to attract devoted followers throughout his life.
Rebel, rebel,
He had a gang of 4 or 5 of them, and they were just a cocky bunch. You approached them at your peril. He was particularly arrogant, I seem to remember, and he didn't really give a damn about the other people.
I think the more staunch and conservative, even of his colleagues, found him a little bit of a pain in the neck. But those who were going through their adolescent rebellion definitely saw him as one of their leaders, if not their principal leader. The head boy of Cool is quite a good description of him.
Staying the head boy of Cool is constant hard work. But for Tony Blair, it's all part of the bigger picture forming in his head.
I believe he spent his time drilling himself into becoming a kind of rock star persona. He absolutely modelled himself on Mick Jagger, and he looked very like Mick Jagger. And he could move like Mick Jagger. He has a kind of bendiness about him. And I saw this creature gradually develop into someone who, for me, probably was Mick Jagger.
While Tony worked his rock star style in his bedroom, at school he seized on the opportunity to take centre stage.
He was the best actor here of his generation, and I think exceptionally good for any generation. He might have been able to make a career in that field if he wanted to.
Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. I come to bury Caesar, not to praise him.
I was in a house production of Julius Caesar where he played Mark Antony, and he gave an excellent performance.
The evil that men do lives after them. The good they do is oft interred with their bones. So let it be with Caesar.
He could act. I mean, he knew what he was doing, whereas the rest of us just learnt the lines and stood there and spouted them.
If it were so, it was a grievous fault, and grievously hath he answered it.
The time when I was most forcibly reminded of Tony Blair's acting talents and his delivery was when he read a lesson at Diana's funeral, which was extremely mannered. It was like a performance by an old actor who'd lost his real passion for acting but could still remember all his techniques.
As the Laurence Olivier of Fettes, Tony Blair is in an ideal position to take advantage of a new development in his final year. Girls have been admitted to the school.
I seem to remember Tony got on quite well with some of the girls. I'm not saying he was a ladies' man, but certainly through his acting, he had much more of an opportunity to meet them.
The first girls arrived at Fettes in Tony Blair's time, and it says a lot about him that he was extremely friendly with the very first girl. He had the charisma. I've got 3 daughters, so I think I understand this. They're always attracted to danger. And he was the dangerous guy.
Despite the distractions, the head boy of Cool is leaving Fettes with 2 A's and a B in his A-levels. But before he goes to university, the future Prime Minister is heading to London to pursue his real dream.
If you had asked anybody at Fettes then whether Tony Blair was going to be Prime Minister, let alone a politician, they would have laughed you in the face. He had no political view at all. And I don't personally believe there was an agenda at that stage. It was just, I don't really want to be part of this. It's all a bit kind of childish. I want to be a rock star, please.
It's 1971 and London is the place to be. Especially if, like 19-year-old Tony Blair, you're desperate to become a rock star. Sadly, he's forgotten to tell anyone he's coming. But every cloud has a silver lining. According to his future wife, sleeping rough for a night enables Tony to understand the plight of the homeless. And Tony won't be left out in the cold for long. He's got the old boy network to fall back on.
I knew somebody who must have gone to Fettes, I assume, and must have mentioned to him that my parents were away for 2 weeks. And one evening, the doorbell went, and there was this guy, and Tony next to him, and with that famous grin. And the chap asked, could this guy, Tony, stay for one night? We're in my parents' bedroom, as it would have been back in 1971, so this is where he would have actually slept. But the interesting thing is that he definitely said he would only stay for a day, and it worked out being 2 weeks. It just happened. He just didn't go. And I introduced him to some friends whilst he was here.
I first met him at a friend's house, a guy called Chris Blishen, and he was introduced to me as a great guitarist who'd come down to London and was looking for someone to play gigs with. And so I explained to him that I was quite an up-and-coming rock promoter. I'm not sure how true either of those statements were. And I can remember him showing up at my parents' house in Kensington, and it was probably fairly soon after.
Hi, Alan. Great to see you.
Yeah, you too.
I'm Tony, remember? We met at the party.
Right, yeah. You play the guitar. Come on in.
He appeared with a tatty brown suitcase and a big grin, and before we knew it, he was staying. So one of the very engaging things about Tony is he has this tremendous confidence that it'll be all right on the night. So here's Inverness Gardens, and yeah, here's number 8, right at the end here, where Tony stayed for 6 or 7 months. That little tiny window there is the window into a thing which we used to call the space, which was literally a space between the bedroom and the bathroom, and we converted it into a bedroom, and Tony stayed there.
The ever-resourceful Tony Blair may have grinned his way into free food and lodging, but for his rock dream to come true, he needs to convince the West London hippie crowd that he's cool enough to be part of their scene.
The way we lived our life in those days was that we always met up, all of us, every weekend. So we were always part of a big group. Alan and I were going out together, and the Colonet House became a centre for meeting.
Everybody, this is Tony. Tony, this is everybody.
Hi.
One day, Tony appeared, and he was introduced into this group of people who'd known each other for a long time.
Hi. I'm Tony.
And it must have been quite hard for him. So it was important for him, for people to like him. I know he's got this image at Fettes of being the naughty boy at school. In London, I don't think that came across so much.
Tony.
I mean, it always surprises me when I read this thing, the King of Cool at Fettes. I find that a bit strange, actually. He was nice looking, there's no doubt about that, but he had no cool.
London's amazing. Yeah. I love it.
In general, he came over as a bit of a nerd, really. To me, he had this sort of puppy-like innocence, enthusiasm, you know, like, you know, with his ears flopping all over the place.
Although the cool weekend hippie crowd are difficult to convince, Tony does prove to be something of a people person.
I still get the same old feeling.
To begin with, you might think, good heavens, look at that hair or the jeans or something, but once you got to know him, because he had a very sincere way about him, and I think that would reassure most anxious mothers.
The real thing with Tony is that he likes people. And I really remember, you know, he would take trouble with people that couldn't do him any good. Maybe it was a bus conductor or something. And he'd make you feel like you were the only person in the world that he was really interested in talking to at that moment. And he had a great sense of humour, and I liked a good laugh. I think that was a big part of why it was fun to hang out together.
Jump! Jump!
All Tony's hard work is paying off. He has a new best friend. It's time to take his first tentative steps into the rock world.
I remember Blair sitting there with Clarence, which was the name he gave to his blue guitar. And I remember we were trying to write a song.
I got it, okay. What's going on?
I like it, yeah.
So he was sitting there strumming Clarence.
Right.
The whole neck fell off the guitar with a loud twang. Thing collapsed in a heap on the floor. And, you know, he wasn't embarrassed. He just put it back together again and we carried on. Because we realised that we didn't know much about music or how to write a song. And it turned out he knew 2 chords, I think. I think he might know 3 now.
There are other ways into the music industry, you know.
Are there?
Yeah, as rock promoters. I mean, without them, there is no show.
Actually, that's not a bad idea. How hard can it be? All you need is a band.
I know a band.
Great.
Tony's found an alternative stepping stone to rock and roll fame. He and Alan set themselves up as managers of Jaded, a group of ex-public school hippies.
We used to rehearse at my place, my parents' house, in the basement. And the boys said, I mind just coming down today. Tone came along, and he seemed to be, even at the time, not convincing as a rock band promoter. And was generally over-friendly, as if he was trying to be ingratiating.
Hi, I'm Tony.
This is Adam, Mike, Paddy, and Theo. They're Jaded.
And I can understand why. I mean, I know what it's like. Here you are, a really terrific band, but you feel the opportunities just aren't out there. Well, they are now.
Tony.
Yeah.
They're Jaded as in the name of the band is Jaded.
I know.
He just seemed to smile a bit too much for my liking. I didn't really trust him 100%. He just wanted to be, in some fashion, someone who was doing something in a trendy, sort of happening area.
We weren't looking for anybody anyway. I mean, it wasn't a question of, hey, we need management to go further. It was, hey, these guys want to do it. All right, fine, why not?
Tony now has a band, but to develop a rock and roll reputation, he also needs a venue.
We decided we'd go through the yellow pages and phone Vickers to see if we could rent a church hall and put on a disco, maybe sneak in a live band.
Perhaps you can help me, Father. Is the church hall available for hire? For a, you know, rock concert? A night of contemporary music? Chamber orchestra?
And I remember, you know, hours phoning through the yellow pages. There were no answering machines then, you know, you just had to phone until you got through.
Naturally, you were the first person we thought of.
Try and convince them that it was more of a social club.
Social club? Well, not socialist.
Than it was, you know, a full-bore rock business.
We want to reintroduce the parish youth to the church. Of course. We would hope to make a small contribution to the...
And, you know, if you try hard enough...
A large contribution to the church.
You get lucky.
You do? You mean, we can? And what's it called? The Vineyard. Brilliant.
And so we ended up getting the Vineyard eventually as being the first place that we could, you know, do gigs.
Tony may not be centre stage, but it isn't the end of his rock dream. And with the basement of this church hall in Richmond to fill, the Colonet household becomes a hive of activity.
Hi.
There was always paperwork all over the tables and people designing posters and the telephone going, and the girls who were there would just be sitting having cups of tea and letting the boys get on with their boy thing.
We had to get the publicity out. We didn't have any money, you know, so that was a slight handicap. But there was a lot of anticipation, you know, and in both our minds this was going to be huge. So we had that in mind. There was no shortage of ego, you know, involved. This was going to be the greatest thing that had ever been put on.
Have you got the lecture set? Okay.
Okay, what we need is across the top in big letters, Blair Colonet Promotions.
Whoa, wait a minute. Blair Colonet?
Yeah, only because it's alphabetical, you know. Blair Colonet. I mean, if C came before B, it would be Colonet first and Blair second, happily. But, you know, it doesn't, so it isn't.
Alan comes before Tony.
Well, yeah, but hang on. I mean, you know, hang on a minute. It always goes on surnames.
Tony's beginning to think like a true self-promoter. And to cement his move into the world of business, he's bought the Blair Colonet Partnership a van.
Ta-da!
The van was almost a character in its own right.
You spent 50 quid on this?
It came with a full tank of petrol.
You got ripped off.
I didn't.
Yes, you did.
You have to look at the van, not as a physical entity, but as a symbol. We have a van. We are rock promoters. You know?
It was a 1,500 weight Thames trader.
Great.
That probably should have been on the in the scrapyard 5 years earlier.
Dual headlamps, you know?
It used to break down with a monotony little short of miraculous.
One of the ways where Tony was very useful is that he was able to persuade people to do things. So if the van broke down, Tony was the one to go and find somebody with a car to take all the equipment to the Vineyard and would manage to persuade them that that's in fact what they did want to do, even though they'd thought of spending a nice quiet evening at home.
Brilliant, isn't it?
Tony could charm the birds out of the trees. If he wanted something, he would get it by making sure that the person heard what they needed to hear. And he was very, very good at it. In fact, I think he's probably that most dangerous of men, a politician who actually believes what they say. The fact that that can change depending on the audience doesn't diminish that one iota. It is merely a form of spin. And I think there was good evidence of that, even in 1972.
The partnership now has a band, a venue and a van. All they need is 150 people to fill the hall.
I was a lot shyer than he was, and that doesn't take much doing, because he was probably the least shy person I'd ever met. So I would do the tasks mostly that didn't involve dealing with people. He wasn't bad at organising, he was just very good with people, and I was ashamed to waste that kind of talent, you know. Alan, I recollect as being the quieter partner of the two. I'm not sure that one can draw conclusions for Tony's later relationships with advisors like Peter Mandelson, but Tony certainly needed a partner. Partner in crime, partner in business, call it what you will. We would go to girls' schools and we'd phone and say, when does your school get out? You know, and I know the headmaster would wonder who the hell these people were.
See you there.
And, you know, I remember a lot of times the girls would say to Tony, will you be there? You know, and he'd grin bigly and say, I'll be there, you know.
Hi, honey. What's your name?
He was a very engaging character.
I'll just call you Honey then.
He also had a language he would adopt. He'd say, let's go, honeys. And I think that's something that we all imagine Mick Jagger might say. Not that he ever did.
Tony Blair's legendary people skills have been put to the test, but the campaigning is over. On the 4th of December 1971, the future PM will find out if he has what it takes to make it in the hard-boiled world of church hall rock. It's 1971, and Tony Blair is in London pursuing his dream of rock stardom. While he continues to perfect his act, he's moonlighting as a rock promoter. It's the 4th of December, and he's launching Jaded in the basement of this church hall. It's make or break. Priced at only 30 pence and with no alcohol, the gig is attracting mainly teenagers. Among them, Alan's sister, 13-year-old Annie Collinette.
Well, this is the main entrance to the Vineyard, which has really happy memories for me, because this just signals the time I would arrive and the excitement that was happening down there, and I just couldn't wait to get there.
I could never estimate how many people were there. Let's say 100 to 200, probably something like that. There was no license, so it was soft drinks only. I mean, to transplant it back in time from now, most people, they'd see it as something really kind of quaint.
The first Vineyard that I seem to have recorded in my diary is on the 3rd of December, and I make a comment that it was quite good. Not a bad start, really.
With 150 customers packing the Vineyard, the partnership is raking in £45 a night. Things are going well, and Tony's discovering that without even being a rock star, he's managing to attract groupies.
It's strange. I can remember this whole room, and I can remember approximately here where I danced with him. I was absolutely madly in love with Tony Blair because he was gorgeous with this long blonde hair and angelic smile, and I was the envy of my friends because he was sort of a friend of mine.
Maybe the secret of Tony's attraction, especially to the younger girls, is the kind of boy band, slightly asexual attraction. It certainly wasn't the danger of Jim Morrison or Jimi Hendrix. In fact, there was a kind of helplessness to him, and I suspect this may have been part of the secret of his charm.
This is outside the Vineyard at the top of the stairs, but you can see from the hair, both very girly looking and very kind of pretty boy. But yes, the tie-dye shirt and the bare feet.
There are photographs of him not wearing shoes, barefoot. I don't remember Tony ever being barefoot. I think they were probably posed for pictures, to be quite honest.
Tony's posing has already done enough to earn him a junior following, but he's not satisfied. The future PM wants to come out of the wings to become a rock god.
I think he could easily imagine being one of them, if he'd really put his mind to it.
I knew that Tone played guitar, but to be honest, I'd never heard him play guitar. I think Tone was in awe of Adam's guitar playing, and I don't think he'd have dared sort of do anything in front of us.
It's easy to say in hindsight, but I think Tony could have done anything that he put his mind to, almost literally. And you know, if 75% of being a rock star is looks and personality, you know, Tony had it. You know.
Even without Tony Blair's centre stage, the Vineyard is so successful that it becomes a hot ticket event. But despite being manager and promoter, Tony still hasn't really been accepted in the rock scene.
Tony used to come up and say something along the lines of, well done guys, that was brilliant.
Brilliant, guys. You know, I mean, brilliant.
I seem to remember the word brilliant used quite a lot, and he genuinely enjoyed what we did.
This is for you.
But this is not Al McGee and Oasis. This is just doing a few gigs.
So, where are we off to tonight?
But outside of the band and anything to do with the band, I didn't particularly see Tony.
Actually, guys, I'm not hungry. You go on without me.
I mean, obviously, you'd be into the music to do that job at that age, you know. I mean, because basically you're acting as a gopher for, you know, teenage boys, which can't be fun.
Remember, one of them was constantly saying, roadies, go and get me a hamburger. And Tony didn't like being called roadie, nor did I. So we'd mimic them mercilessly, you know. Tony would imitate these egotistical rock musicians that, you know, weren't that good, treating him like a roadie.
And would he go get the burger?
We'd get the burger, yeah. If it meant a gig happening on time, we'd get the burger, yeah. But, you know, we had the last laugh because we probably made more than they did at the gig.
But Tony isn't happy with the last laugh. It's just making him all the more determined to be the one getting the applause.
Why was Tony ambitious to be a rock star? Because, you know, being a rock star was the thing everyone wanted to be in those days. And if he wanted to be popular and wanted to be cool, then clearly that would have been a model to follow.
At Blair Colonet HQ, Tony wants to prove that he too deserves a place on the Vineyard stage.
I can't get no satisfaction, and I try, and I try, and I try, and I try. I can't get no satisfaction. No satisfaction! So, you know, that was it. What do you think?
As every rock manager knows, talent is not the only thing that opens the door to rock stardom.
If you seriously want to go on stage, then we're going to have to seriously work on a new image for you.
I don't think he thought about it much. He'd say, oh my God, I need a pair of trousers, you know, because these ones have fallen apart. And then he'd go and buy a pair of trousers. I mean, we went to the Kensington Market one time. It was before he was going to appear on stage. And we frog marched him down there. because his trousers were just, you know, you couldn't be seen in public with him anymore.
People are looking, but they don't know what to do. It's the time of the reason for the people like you.
I think Tone was playing up to do the part. The truth of the matter was, Tone wanted to be part of the scene. And so he was pushing it, extrapolating it right out. Quiet didn't need to be that. He was already cool anyway. Tone wasn't, and Tone needed to push it out a bit further.
We made him buy this pair of white loon trousers. They had a sort of crisscross lace-up fly, which even then was ridiculous. It's the kind of thing that Jethro Tull might have worn once at the Isle of Wight festival, but you know that never again for good reason.
Having received his London makeover, Tony Blair finally takes his first steps onto the rock stage on February the 19th, 1972.
Excuse me, the canteen's now closing, so if you want to get something, you better get it now. The canteen's now closing, so if you want to get something, you better get it now.
Lovely. Oh, that's got to be copyright, that, isn't it?
First speech. I mean, do you think there's anything in that? The canteen is now closing.
Yeah.
You know, so you're all out of a job.
You better get it now.
You better get it now.
Yes.
Tony is still a long way from being the new Mick Jagger. But the opportunities to live the rock and roll lifestyle are increasing.
You know, people always talk about drugs and, you know, how we must all have been, you know, smoking drugs back then.
What's it all mean, Brian?
Drugs were around. I mean, again, we were dabbling, so we'd be doing some smoking.
No, thank you. Really, I'm fine. Thanks.
And I can categorically say I never saw Tony Blair do anything with drugs. And I mean, never, never, never.
I think if you're a public school boy and you're 17 or 18, you're likely to play at living the hard-charging rock-style life. But once it gets serious, you're probably going to steer away from some of what goes on. And I know Tony and I did.
Despite his rock star ambitions, the future PM isn't exactly a rock and roll hellraiser. But that doesn't stop him from letting his hair down.
X number of people, could be 20, could be 60, went to somebody's house and they'd bring a bottle. So there'd be wine, probably pretty cheap wine. And people would just mix and get together and drink and talk.
I do remember parties at various people's houses all over, and once in a while they were fairly raunchy parties. There was one party, and it was quite a small gathering, and it eventually developed, and I cannot remember who suggested it or where it came from, but we had a very innocent game of spin the bottle. And this was a spin the bottle striptease. And I remember Tony certainly ended up naked. Once you had no clothes on, then you spun for a partner of the opposite sex and would disappear into a corner. To do, if the truth be told, not very much at all. The rest of us sheepishly did our thing, but it was innocent stuff.
In my memories of Tony, I feel that his life in London was divided into two. There was the first part, which took it up to about, I don't know, January probably. And I think he was rather shy with girls at that time. And then the Vineyard took off, and this must have given him more confidence, because certainly after Christmas, he was very popular with the girls. And it would be fair to say that his social life was more social.
In a personal sense, I didn't find him attractive. I almost saw him as asexual. I mean, in the sense that it wasn't something he was interested in. Of course, that's highly unlikely with teenage boys, isn't it?
You know, we don't have to do this. I mean, not if you don't really want to. As long as you're sure. Oh, right. You're sure?
He had charisma, and there were always people around him. There was girls around him. There's a picture of him in some disco somewhere in West London. There's also a picture of him, which I think must be in the Vineyard. But it's quite interesting looking at some of these photographs with his grin. And if you look at pictures of him now, he has exactly the same ability as a politician to ensure that he's the centre of the photograph and your eyes gravitate towards him.
Tony had, probably still has now, an almost uncanny influence over women, but also over men. I mean, if he had decided on an alternative career path, he could have started his own religion quite easily.
But Tony's ambitions remain somewhat closer to the ground. He's still hell-bent on persuading everybody that he's got what it takes to be a rock star. Tony Blair's ambition to become a rock star has so far been thwarted. He's stuck being a rock manager. But after 14 gigs in a local church hall, he's determined to move on. The Blair Colonet Partnership are about to hire a much bigger venue, the QA Hall.
Q&A stands for not question and answer, but Queen Alexandra Hall, which sounds a lot grander than it is with respect to Queen Alexandra. But in fact, it was a hall opposite the Albert Hall, and it seated probably 4,000 or 5,000 people. So it's a fairly grand venue for people that are running gigs at the Vineyard, which, if you pack in 300 people, you're a fire hazard. And it was our attempt to, to move up toward the big time.
And to ensure success in the big time, Tony is determined to make changes.
Al, listen to me.
No.
What do all great rock promoters have in common? They all have great rock bands to promote. We have Jaded.
But we can't just call free.
Why not?
Because they're like a world-famous rock band.
Exactly. So we can get people to come easily.
Most of this would have been Tony's idea. He was very bold. So the next phone call was to Free's manager, and he had me make that one.
Hey, anybody can book a band if they can guarantee the money or they can do the gig, so not so bold. Okay, they were quite big at the time, but yeah, good move on his part.
They want 25,000 up front.
Free don't come cheap, do they?
Blair and I had about £100 between us, so we decided that wasn't going to work either. And so we did a thing called Bands with a Future, showcasing the winners of the National Rock Folk Contest, which was sponsored, I think, by Melody Maker magazine. And we said we're talent scouts and we're going to put on a big gig in London, and would you like to sign up? And they said, yeah, we'll sign up, and so we put them on.
The door to the elusive world of rock seemed to be opening, but the partnership is faced with a crucial decision. In the past, entrance has been an affordable 30p, but this is Bands with a Future.
It's a lot of money.
Yeah, but, it is value for money.
It might scare people off.
I mean, they're bands with a future. Melody Maker said so.
Ooh. All right. 40p it is.
Great. You won't regret this.
We thought we'd have this place just rocking and full,
On Saturday, May the 6th, 1972, Tony's 19th birthday, the future Prime Minister makes his move into big-time rock promoting at the QA Hall. Capacity 4,700.
How many?
Still 13.
Very few people came.
It was like a funeral in there.
One guy described it as a frigging funeral. Wanted his money back.
Right. It did cost 40 pence.
Tony agreed with him, gave him his money back.
Thanks very much. We'll see you next time.
I remember them hoping that they were going to get thousands of people, and I recall that about 60 people turned up, so perhaps it wasn't too successful.
It says to QA at 6 p.m. was a disaster. So that didn't bode very well for poor Tony and Alan.
It must have been disappointing and somewhat embarrassing to only get 60-odd people there, but he wouldn't stay down for long. Do you know, I never saw Tony despondent.
We have lost a lot of money.
We have to build on this success. We can't afford to be complacent. We can make the next one even better. We just need to find the right band, the right man to lead us into the future. He's out there. Somewhere.
The things that have stayed with Tony are his charm, his grin, and his tremendous drive and willpower to carry on even when things are looking bad. They didn't give up, they continued, and they made a success of them. And I think that was perhaps a sign of things to come. See, here's one which says, quite good for QA House. So it did get better.
Tony's determination pays off. He and Alan put on 3 more QA gigs, clearing £600 profit. But at the height of his success, time is running out. After 7 months in London, Tony must leave his new friends behind to go up to Oxford to read law.
Did I miss Tony when he left? I hate to say that it was probably quite a while before it dawned on me that he wasn't around.
It's September 1972, and Tony Blair is starting his first term at St John's College, Oxford.
Blair was a noticeable character in college. Not extraordinary, and not because he went out of his way to do it, but his physical appearance, the hair, the coat, meant that you would know he was passing by. He wasn't an anonymous member of college. But on the other hand, I don't think there was anything in Tony Blair at the time that was so sensationally outstanding that you would say, we know where that bloke is headed in 20 or 30 years' time.
The idea that you were going to Oxford and that it would all be a terribly kind of Brideshead Revisited was not the case at all. I mean, you have to remember in the early 70s, the student revolution was going on all over the world. Students then were constantly revolting. So student politics was big on the agenda. And yet, the bizarre thing about that is he didn't do any.
Even with the whole political world opening up in front of him, the young Tony Blair is still determined to be a rock star. And now, with an audition for college band Ugly Rumours, he has his chance. He is determined that for this audition, he's going to be fully prepared.
I can get no satisfaction.
The guy who fronts up a band does have to have a certain amount of charisma and style. Not only a desire to be centre stage, but an ability to command it. Because it's not everybody who wants to take the microphone, who at the end of the day you say you ought to have it. But Blair seemed to do that at that stage quite naturally.
Guys, keep it down. I'm trying to learn a rock anthem in here, Really? Shut up, mate.
Tony's dedication pays off. As the only auditionee who knows all the words, he gets the job. His dream has finally come true. He's now the lead singer of a rock band, Ugly Rumours.
I'm not surprised that Tony played in a band at Oxford. He loved being in the music business, and he'd have gravitated towards that.
It's the autumn of '75, and in just 2 hours, Ugly Rumours will play Corpus Christi College. The goal Tony's been chasing all year is within sight.
Okay, here we go. This is it.
Anthony Charles Linton Blair is about to live out his ultimate rock fantasy. Tony has just a few minutes left to quell his nerves. It's 8 o'clock on October the 14th, and the world, or at least Corpus Christi College, is about to meet Tony Blair, rock star.
Are you having a good time? Great. I can't hear you. Hi, I'm Tony. We are Ugly Rumours.
My memory of seeing him play is very clear because he did a fantastic Jagger impersonation. But hey, you know, we'd all drunk a large amount. There was this guy prancing about on stage, and to our uneducated eyes, he did it pretty well.
He had an okay voice. It wasn't great, you know, but it was mostly the dancing and all that kind of stuff that would have engaged your attention. He would have made a very good mimic. I'm sure he could have had a career as a Mick Jagger mimic if he'd wanted one.
He plainly enjoyed it. This was not a reticent man coming forward, but none of us were running away with any ideas that somebody had been discovered who was going to set the musical world on fire.
Tony Blair is finally where he wants to be. At the Corpus gig, the drum kit collapses. Ugly Rumours will only ever play 6 gigs. Tony's dream is over.
Good night, Corpus. We love you.
In 3 months, he will join the Labour Party.
I've no doubt that if he'd been a good musician and could sing, then he would have been a rock star. Because, you know, you need confidence, you need to be able to strut around on stage. I mean, that's what politicians do in a sense nowadays. And that's probably why he relates so heavily to rock stars today.
If you'd said to me when I was 17, your pal Tony's going to be Prime Minister one day, I would have laughed so hard. And so would he, you know. It would just have been absurd. Back then, to us, politicians were rather pompous individuals that droned on and on and on about unemployment. And, you know, who cares about that when you're 18 and looking for some fun on a Saturday night?
I thought he would continue acting. I thought he would continue performing, but I did not at that time dream that the context in which he would continue doing so would be the political arena.
I think politics is a very good choice for him because it enables him to use his acting ability. If you're going to play on a world stage, you might as well do it from that position.
Do I think politics was second choice? I somehow think he would have given everything to have been a rock star. And how much easier would that have been for him?
Please don't destroy these lands. Don't make this